Welcome to Transcending Mediocrity, How Intelligent Solutions Are Built. My name is Christy Vago of the Intax Accident and Health Group. I recently sat down with Dave Chase, founder of the Health Rosetta, to seek his insights in addressing questions employers face when moving their employees into a high-performing self-funded medical plan. This perspective, along with the comments from Intact, may help employers transcend mediocrity and build intelligent solutions for their employees. Let's get started. Dave, when people ask me who our competition is, I would respond that our fiercest competitor is the status quo. Clients continuing to do what they're already doing. People aren't incented to change unless our value proposition truly resonates with them. In your new book, Relocalizing Health, The Future is Local, Open, and Independent, you talk about breaking down change barriers. Talk a little bit about this concept, what your advisors and community are facing with status quo mentality, and how we can overcome this barrier.
Well, I think there's a really unique opportunity right now, and I think it's important to recognize the backdrop here, and that is COVID is creating an industry inflection point that I believe is at least as big as World War II, where there was a pre-World War II way of thinking and a post-World War II way of thinking. And this is especially true here. And that was, back then, that was whether even you think about the health dimension of that. The employer-based healthcare system came out of World War II. The British National Health Service came out of World War II. And with that as a backdrop, I think it's at this stage of the development of this new, what I think becomes the new normal over the next decade. And it's happening today. It's just not the mainstream. But particularly in the early phases of a transformation, I think we need to draw from social movements, particularly with something as emotionally charged as healthcare. And the change makers are really almost like missionaries that are competing against mercenaries in the status quo. And successful social movements that I've studied are really about resetting expectations. And whether that's in civil rights or healthcare, it's about resetting expectations. And unfortunately today, we're paying Cadillac prices, but getting Pinto health outcomes. If you're old enough to remember the Pintos, they blew up when you rear-ended them. And it's really a pretty horrific expression of our humanity, our healthcare system today, which is really odd because it's such a human thing. And so really foundational principles that I think are helpful is, number one is at a minimum, you think about health benefits for recruiting and retention purposes. That's how most people look at it today. I'd say the forward-looking employers understand that enabling a high-performance workforce is actually what drives profitability, and it's what drives net promoter score. Like if you're a guest at the Rosen Hotels, you may not know about their health benefit story, but you can tell the workers love working there, and that's a big competitive advantage for their in business. The second thing that I would wrap up with is boomers really drove the current model, kind of by default, right? They've been the primary leaders over the last few decades. Certainly that was another, long-term impact of World War II. Millennials will drive the next 20 to 50 years. And as a generation, US millennials, they'd be the 20th largest country if they were a country, behind Germany and bigger than the UK. I mean, this is massive. And does anyone think that companies that optimize for the next 20 years based on boomer design will win with millennials and Gen Z? I think it's pretty clear what the answer is there. So that is the big picture I think people need to have as they look to change hearts and minds, which ultimately is the first step in getting to better health benefits.
Thank you, Dave. And yes, you are right. I do remember the Pinto. And if I'm paying for a Cadillac, I want to get a Cadillac. Although I do prefer SUVs, we can all agree on the point. That is why at Intact, we believe that the status quo is an obstacle, not only for employers, but for all others in the healthcare industry. We need to be thinking about the before and after, and how breaking down barriers, resetting expectations, and affecting change can enhance the overall outcomes. For more difficult questions with Dave and to obtain a complimentary digital copy of his new book, Relocalizing Healthcare, please visit Intact Insurance Specialty Health website at the end of this segment. To address your difficult questions, I welcome the opportunity to talk with you and how we can transcend mediocrity and build intelligent solutions together. Welcome back to Transcending Mediocrity, How Intelligent Solutions Are Built. I'm Christy Vega with Intact Accident and Health Group, and as you may recall, I sat down with Dave Chase, founder of the Health Rosetta, to seek his insights and address questions employers face when moving their employees to a high-performing, self-funded medical benefit plan. This perspective, along with comments from Intact, may help employers transcend mediocrity and build intelligent solutions for their employees. This segment's question focuses on the best practices to recession-proof a health plan. COVID-19 has impacted all of us in some way, if not personally, in our own communities, our businesses, and our clients. Dave, you recently hosted a timely webinar on how to recession-proof a health plan. What are 1 to 2 key elements of recession-proof plans, and describe a real-life client that has used this approach?
You bet. I mean, Health Rosetta style plans, they actually recognize that healthcare isn't expensive. What's expensive is profiteering and price gouging and administrative bloat and fraud. After all, clinicians only get 27 cents of every dollar that we're ostensibly spending on healthcare. Thus, we're investing more than enough money to not only fund a world-class health plan and healthcare system, but also fund what drives 80% of health outcomes. Things like having a job that provides financial resilience to both the employer and employee. A great example of this is Great Lakes Auto in Ohio. Throughout COVID, they had no layoffs, they had no furloughs, because they had resilience that many businesses didn't have, because they weren't squandering money, as unfortunately many businesses have. And really our sweet spot in the Health Rosetta movement is a term now during COVID we hear about, which is really the essential workforce. These are really the doers in the working and middle class that make our country hum. They're the ones that we really are focused in on. They need the help. They're the ones who've had 20 years of wage gains essentially stolen by the healthcare industry. And so when we stop that, they have the resilience as an individual, but at the same time, they work for companies that need to have that resilience as well. And that's really a great example of how you can recession-proof the business. And this won't be our last recession. Hopefully we'll come out of this quickly, but it's certainly something that matters no matter what's going on.
Thank you, Dave. That was insightful and a timely perspective. Our essential workforce continues to make this country hum. Working for an employer that has created a safety net, essentially recession-proofing its business model, including its health plan, allows these workers to continue in confidence. Intact has come to the table supporting businesses that understand this philosophy and have provided a rating system that underscores the importance of working together to create sustainable insurance solutions. In some instances, we have saved employers 20 to 40%, which ultimately goes back to the employer's bottom line. For more difficult questions with Dave and to obtain a complimentary digital copy of his new book, Relocalizing Healthcare, please visit Intact Insurance Specialty Health website at the end of this segment. To address your difficult questions, I welcome the opportunity to talk with you and how we can transcend mediocrity and build intelligent solutions together. Hello, I'm Christy Vago with Intact's Accident and Health Group, and I'm here with Dave Chase, founder of the Health Rosetta, for another segment of Transcending Mediocrity, How Intelligent Solutions Are Built. As employers face difficult questions when moving their employees to a high-performing self-funded medical plan, they need to continue to find alternative paths to help them achieve superior results. In some instances, the alternative path could be right outside their front door. Today's segment focuses on the benefit of thinking locally in order to provide the foundation to build intelligent solutions and transcend mediocrity. Dave, I've often heard you say that the cavalry is not coming from Washington, D.C., and we need to make changes starting in our own local communities. Please share some examples of companies that have been successful in making changes at the local level.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many examples I could share. I mean, what we see is this is working in every corner of the country, in rural settings, urban settings, public companies, private companies, small and large. But let me just give you at least one example. Drew Leatherberry, he's an advisor in Wisconsin. He's a great example where he's really restoring the American dream. And one of the ways he's doing that is he's working with local pharmacies. You know, in many cases, they've kind of been crushed by the chains, and the PBMs have played very unfairly with them. And in a lot of healthcare systems, they're actually the first point of entry into the healthcare system. And so they're working with these local pharmacies in tandem with rebuilding primary care. And so they're doing some novel things with direct primary care and virtual primary care. And Drew understands that in fully actualized primary care, 80 to 90% of all the issues people enter the healthcare system for can be fully addressed in a proper primary care setting. And so that's really at the foundation of the plans. Unfortunately, if you look at most plans today, they reflect that we've destroyed primary care in the US over the last couple decades. That's really unfortunate. It's not easy to rebuild it, but it's straightforward. It's common sense. Again, unfortunately, if you look at a lot of health plans, half of what's thrown in there are just Band-Aids on broken primary care. So Drew and others say, hey, why don't we just fix primary care? Yeah, you're not going to snap your fingers, but this is the reality that there's no well-functioning healthcare system in the world not built on proper primary care. You know, and Wisconsin is a tough state. It's got some of the most extreme price gouging by hospitals in the country. But you know what? It's impossible to price gouge or surprise bill for an ER visit that never happened, for a surgery that was avoided and wasn't necessary. That's what happens very regularly with proper primary care. You see those go down 30, 50%. In some areas of surgery, it goes down by 80 or 90%. Like, one of the most common issues people have is lower back pain. There's a lot of unnecessary surgery. There's a lot of unnecessary opioid prescriptions. And when you have proper primary care, boom, this is what happens. And you don't have to wait for the cavalry from DC to fix it. It's there for the taking. Folks like Drew are making it happen.
From rural to urban communities, whether public or private companies, and everyone in between, finding an alternative path could be right outside your door. The example provided in this segment transcends mediocrity. Instead of putting a Band-Aid on chronic health plan problems, Drew Leatherberry forged an unknown path and was able to create a unique solution utilizing a local PBM. At Intact, we have invested the time to understand these types of solutions in order to properly and proactively credit clients in their stop-loss underwriting. For more difficult questions with Dave and to obtain a complimentary digital copy of his new book, Relocalizing Healthcare, please visit Intact Insurance Specialty Health website at the end of this segment. To address your difficult questions, I welcome the opportunity to talk with you on how we can transcend mediocrity and build intelligent solutions together. Hello, I'm Christy Vega with Intact's Accident and Health Group. We have the good fortune to have Dave Chase, founder of the Health Rosetta, share his insights and unique perspective addressing difficult questions as employers move to high-performing self-funded medical plans. In today's segment, we asked Dave the last question in our series, Transcending Mediocrity, How Intelligent Solutions Are Built. Now that the 2020 presidential election is behind us, what can we do to build momentum the Health Rosetta movement needs to create lasting change for the next presidential election cycle becomes the focus once again?
Yeah, well, candidly, we don't invest a lot of time worrying about presidential elections. We're a fiercely nonpartisan group, and what we found is decent Americans across the political spectrum largely want the same thing, despite what media and political campaigns will tell you. And I'd like to read a quote from Chapter 1 of Relocalizing Health from the most transformative thinker I've met in my career. He's Chris Brookfield is who I'm referring to. And he's speaking about large-scale system change. He has played a key role in architecting large-scale system change from abroad and in India, lifting tens of millions of individuals out of poverty to remaking the most important input into the food system in the US. And what they have in common is being post-political. So here's the quote from Chris. One indicator that a movement is ready for development in the commercial sphere is when it ceases to be perceived as political within the relevant communities. While movements remain politicized, there's insufficient agreement when the community itself is split in its support. And this method of commercial development is doomed at the outset. On the other hand, it was obvious in the case of both microcredit and local food that virtually everyone in the local communities agreed with the underlying premise. And when community business models and commercial values align, they were able to attract nearly unanimous support. I mean, I saw that in the county. That's the end of the quote. I saw that in the county that's one south of where we are, where you had very conservative farmers with, very progressive, local foodies. They actually largely want the same thing. And so what we feel blessed about is to have people across the political spectrum, their beliefs, who share a desire to restore the American dream. They realize it's on all of us to fix healthcare. And we have this philosophy called get on the bus. Everyone's invited on the bus. We're going on a great journey with fantastic people. Be a fun ride. Sure, we'll hit some potholes and may even have a flat tire along that journey, but the journey is to a far better place. And I really hope you join us and hop on that bus, and we're ready to have a great ride. And, thank you, Christy, and thank you to Intact Insurance for giving me the opportunity to answer some questions.
Thank you, Dave. If we at Intact continue to lead and demonstrate that a one-size-fits-all approach will never yield the best results, and opt to work with employers who have adopted incentives to bend the trend curve on their claim costs in a favorable way, we will be well poised to continue to transcend mediocrity by instituting stop-loss programs that complement the strides these highly engaged employers are taking. Election cycle or not, the focus we bring to ensuring better outcomes at a lower cost is critical for success. It has been a pleasure sitting down with Dave Chase, founder of the Health Rosetta. His insights and perspective, along with the unique understanding carriers such as Intact bring to the healthcare marketplace, will continue to drive the ability to debunk the status quo, deploy local outreach, and continue to build momentum that ultimately affects the change that is needed. Transcend mediocrity.